The sun had long set on Hollywood Boulevard when Clint Eastwood's black SUV pulled up to the studio's back entrance. The security guard nodded with reverence as Hollywood's last true outlaw stepped out, his weathered face showing no trace of the nervousness that typically afflicts talk show guests. "You're watching behind the scenes Hollywood's biggest showdowns, and tonight we're uncovering what really happened when Clint Eastwood walked onto Jimmy Kimmel's stage for what should have been a routine interview and ended up getting thrown off in a blaze of defiance that shocked America. How did a simple talk show segment spiral into the most talked about television moment of the year? Let's get into it." If Clint hadn't stood his ground that night, refusing to play the game on Kimmel's terms, he would have become just another circus act for ratings. Another legend reduced to wearing prop hats and cracking scripted jokes. But that's not who Clint Eastwood is. At 94, with nothing left to prove to anyone, he came to talk about something real. His latest film, a stark drama about a rancher fighting corporate America. The stakes weren't just about one man's dignity, they were about whether authenticity still has a place in the manufactured world of late-night television. Inside the studio, the audience was electric with anticipation. Clint Eastwood, in his 90s yet still commanding respect like few others in Hollywood, was the night's main attraction. His presence alone could hush a room. That iconic squint, the gravelly drawl that had delivered some of cinema's most memorable lines. His latest film wasn't just another project, it was a story about standing your ground against forces that would crush the individual, themes that had defined Eastwood's entire career both on and off screen. Unlike many celebrities who've mastered the art of the talk show circuit, Clint had never warmed to it. The forced laughter, the polished anecdotes, the carefully choreographed spontaneity. He had agreed to this appearance for one reason, to get the word out about his film. Anything beyond that, and he simply wasn't interested in playing along. Backstage, the tensions were already mounting. Maggie, Clint's assistant of 20 years, moved with quiet efficiency, her eyes scanning everything with the practiced wariness of someone who's seen it all. Earlier that day she had cornered the show's producers, her voice low but firm. "Mr. Eastwood is here to discuss his film. That's it. Don't try to turn him into a circus act." The producers had nodded, their smiles too wide, too eager. Maggie had been around long enough to recognize the look. They were already planning something, already seeing the potential for viral moments, for clips that would circulate online for days. They wanted Clint to play along with their skits, maybe put on a cowboy hat, crack jokes at his own expense. Maggie knew better. Clint Eastwood didn't bend for anyone, not for studios, not for directors, and certainly not for talk show hosts. The producers had dismissed her concerns, and now the stage was set for conflict. In the green room, Clint nursed a black coffee, his eyes fixed on a monitor showing Jimmy Kimmel working through his opening monologue. The host was in rare form tonight, slicing through celebrity scandals and political gaffes with practiced ease, the audience responding with waves of laughter. Clint's expression remained unchanged, but his fingers tapped a slow rhythm against his chair, a subtle tell that Maggie immediately recognized. He was sizing up the situation, much like a gunfighter might assess an opponent before the draw. "They're going to try something," she murmured to a nearby stagehand, who merely shrugged, oblivious to the brewing storm. The stage manager appeared at the door, headset in place, and signaled that it was time. Clint rose without fanfare, straightened his jacket with a single efficient motion, and headed for the stage. Alone, no entourage, no fuss, just a man walking to meet whatever waited for him. Clint Eastwood's entrance onto the stage brought the audience to their feet, a standing ovation that felt more like a tribute than a welcome. He acknowledged them with a slight nod, taking his seat across from Jimmy Kimmel with the ease of a man completely comfortable in his own skin. The respect in the room was palpable, but so was the anticipation. This wasn't going to be an ordinary interview. Jimmy began earnestly enough, asking about the film's themes: loyalty, standing your ground, the principles that drive a person to fight even when the odds are stacked against them. Clint's responses were measured, thoughtful, laden with the weight of a man who had lived these values rather than just portrayed them on screen. The audience hung on every word, pulled into the gravity of his authenticity. There was something almost hypnotic about it. This wasn't the practiced charm of the typical Hollywood star, but something rarer, genuine conviction. Sensing the audience's intense focus on Clint's serious tone, Jimmy shifted in his seat, seemingly uncomfortable with the depth of the conversation. Talk show hosts thrive on keeping things light, bouncing from topic to topic, never lingering too long on anything too heavy. With a forced smile, Jimmy tossed out a quip about Clint's cowboy days, asking if he still spent time on horseback. The question felt jarring after the weight of their previous exchange. Clint's response was blunt, a terse, when necessary, that left no room for the playful banter Jimmy had been fishing for. The audience's laughter was nervous, scattered as they sensed the disconnect between host and guest. Jimmy pushed on, trying to regain control of the conversation's direction, but Clint remained steadfast, refusing to be diverted from the substance of what he'd come to discuss. The tension in the studio began to simmer, subtle but unmistakable. The breaking point came when Jimmy, still trying to steer toward lighter territory, reached behind his desk and produced a prop, a cowboy hat, complete with exaggerated embellishments, clearly meant as a joke. The audience clapped, thinking it was all in good fun, but Clint's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened, and without raising his voice, he said simply, "Put that away." 3 words, spoken calmly but with such authority that they fell like stones in the suddenly silent studio. Jimmy tried to laugh it off, explaining that it was just for fun, but Clint wasn't having it. "I'm not here for that," he said, his voice level but firm. "I came to talk about the film." The audience didn't know how to react. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others seemed to lean forward, sensing that they were witnessing something raw and unscripted in a world where everything is usually carefully managed. Backstage, Maggie watched the monitor, her suspicions confirmed. The producers had ignored her warnings, and now they were seeing the consequences unfold in real time. Jimmy, feeling the control slipping away, made another attempt to salvage the situation by redirecting the conversation back to the film. "Let's talk about what inspired the rancher's story," he offered, clearly hoping to get things back on stable ground. But Clint, now fully aware of the game being played, wasn't going to make it easy. "It's about people who don't roll over," he said, his eyes locked on Jimmy's. "People who fight back when the world tries to steamroll them, tries to make them into something they're not." The words hung in the air, loaded with meaning beyond just the film's plot. Some in the audience began to applaud, recognizing the double meaning, while others exchanged uncertain glances. Jimmy nodded, a tight smile fixed on his face, but the discomfort was evident. This wasn't just about a movie anymore, it was about principles, about authenticity versus performance, and Clint Eastwood was making his stand in real time, on live television. With the tension now unmistakable, Jimmy tried to pivot, asking about technical aspects of the film's production, Clint's directing style, anything to move away from the increasingly charged atmosphere. But Clint cut him off mid-sentence, his patience clearly at an end. "I came here to talk about something real," he said, his voice steady but filled with quiet intensity. "Not to be some sideshow for your ratings." The audience stirred, some cheering in support of Clint's candor, others visibly uncomfortable with the confrontation. Jimmy, caught off guard by the directness of the attack, attempted to push back, suggesting that entertainment was part of the show's purpose, but Clint wasn't backing down. "Entertainment doesn't have to be empty," he responded, his words measured but pointed. "It can have substance. It can make people think." The divide in the room grew more apparent, with some audience members nodding in agreement while others seemed to side with Jimmy's more lighthearted approach. As the tension reached its peak, Clint leaned forward in his chair, his gaze intensifying as it locked with Jimmy's. "I've been in this business longer than you've been alive," he said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge. "I don't need to play games to sell a story that matters." The studio erupted into a mix of reactions, some audience members shouting their support for Clint, others calling for Jimmy to stand his ground. The energy in the room had transformed completely, morphing from entertainment into something more primal, more authentic. Jimmy, visibly flustered now, tried once more to lighten the mood, but his attempt fell flat. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone could feel it. With a desperate smile that didn't reach his eyes, Jimmy leaned forward. "Hey, we're just having fun here, Clint. No need to get heated." But his words rang hollow, and Clint wasn't having it. "Fun?" he repeated, his voice carrying decades of authority. You call this fun? Parading people out here to make them look foolish for a few laughs. The audience fell silent, the moment heavy with tension. Jimmy tried to recover, asking about Clint's favorite roles from the past, but Clint cut him off sharply. You don't get it, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. This isn't about me or my past. It's about respect. Respect for the work, for the audience, for the truth of what we're doing here. Scattered applause broke out, along with some murmurs of dissent, the room now clearly divided on the unfolding drama. The confrontation escalated as Jimmy, now visibly losing his grip on the situation, tried to appeal to Clint's legendary status. Look, Clint, we're just trying to give the fans what they want, he said, gesturing to the audience. They love you, they want to see the legend. Clint's response was immediate and cutting. They don't want a clown, he said, his voice low but carrying to every corner of the studio. They want truth, they want something real in a world that's increasingly fake. The words seemed to hang in the air, the audience now fully engaged in the drama unfolding before them, divided between those cheering for Clint's stance and those booing what they perceived as disrespect toward their host. In the control room, producers frantically debated whether to cut to commercial, but the raw authenticity of the moment kept them from making the call. This was television gold, even if it wasn't the kind they had planned. On stage, Jimmy stood up, his patience finally exhausted. You want to talk about respect, he said, his voice rising. How about respecting the people who invited you here tonight? The audience erupted again, the division even more pronounced. Clint rose to his feet as well, towering over Jimmy despite his ear. Respect is earned, he said, his voice calm but powerful, not bought with lights and applause. With that he removed his microphone, placed it on the chair and walked off the stage, leaving Jimmy standing alone amidst the chaos of the audience's reaction. So what's the takeaway from one of late-night television's most shocking moments? Perhaps it's this: in a world increasingly dominated by spectacle over substance, by manufactured moments over authentic expression, there's still room for those who refuse to play along, who stand by their principles regardless of the consequence. Clint Eastwood walked into that studio as a legend, and walked out as something more, a reminder that integrity isn't just a character trait we admire in movies, but something that can still exist in the real world, even under the bright lights of Hollywood. Sometimes true power isn't about controlling the narrative, it's about being willing to walk away from it entirely, and that might be the most valuable lesson of all.